Have you ever wondered why some people, without saying a word, command respect the moment they walk into a room? They don't explain, they don't rush, they don't try to be liked, and still, they're unforgettable. What do they have that others don't? What have they discovered that you, perhaps, have forgotten? Carl Jung believed that the human soul is not meant to be fully exposed to the world. That part of our suffering comes from giving too much of ourselves away. You try to be kind. You try to be available. You try to be understood. But somewhere along the way, you begin to feel empty, invisible, tired of always being within reach. And here's the secret most people never realize. The more emotionally reachable you are, the more you become a puppet of other people's moods. They press, you react, they disappear. You chase, they frown. You explain. You hand over your peace just to avoid being misunderstood. But what if that's not peace? What if that's emotional slavery disguised as connection? You see, becoming unreachable isn't about becoming cold. It's about becoming whole. It's not shutting the world out. It's choosing what gets in. It's the quiet, powerful shift from reacting to everything to choosing what deserves your energy. And once that shift begins, once you stop trying to be accessible, explainable, likable, you don't become less human. You become more powerful. This video is not about building walls. It's about reclaiming your center. It's about the sacred art of becoming emotionally unreachable, not as a defense, but as a declaration. So if you've ever felt too seen yet not understood, too generous yet not valued, this is for you. Because when you stop giving yourself away, you start returning to yourself. And that changes everything. They say kindness is a virtue. But what happens when that kindness becomes a habit and that habit becomes a prison? You answer every message. You show up when they call. You explain your every move just to make sure no one misunderstands you. And in doing so, you disappear. Not all at once, but slowly, softly, a little more each time you say yes, when your soul whispered no. At first it feels noble, being there for everyone, being the one who always listens, who always cares, who never says, I need space. But slowly, a strange fatigue sets in, not just in your body, but in your spirit. A fatigue that no sleep can fix, because it isn't caused by effort, but by disconnection. Disconnection from yourself. You become a reflection of what others need from you. A shapeshifter, a pleaser, a performer on a stage you never auditioned for. Carl Jung once said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And maybe that's what being too available is, an escape from yourself. Because if you're always reacting to others, you never have to stop and feel. You never have to ask the terrifying question, what do I actually want? Who am I? When no one is asking anything from me. We're taught to think availability is love, that to be good is to be open, that silence is rude, that distance is selfish. But here's the truth. Always being reachable doesn't make you more loving. It makes you more vulnerable to being drained, manipulated, reshaped, because the world reads you. It notices how fast you respond, how quickly you explain, how desperately you want to be liked. And it uses that, not always with cruelty, sometimes unconsciously. But the result is the same. Your peace becomes public property. And the worst part, you start to think it's normal to feel scattered, to never rest, to constantly check your phone in case someone needs you. But what about you? Who protects your energy when you spend it on everyone but yourself? Who listens to your silence when your role has become always being the voice for others? The cost of being too available is that you become unavailable to yourself. You no longer ask yourself what you feel because you're too busy feeling what others expect. And this is where it begins. The turning point, the quiet rebellion. Not against others, but for yourself. You stop responding out of obligation. You stop justifying every decision. You let the silence speak for you. And at first, it feels terrifying, like losing control. But soon, you realize that what you're losing was never peace. It was performance. The real you has been waiting beneath all that noise, waiting for you to stop being reachable to the world and start being reachable to yourself. We live in a world where everyone is connected, but no one feels seen. You scroll through your feed, reply to messages, laugh at stories, drop emojis in conversations that mean almost nothing, and yet, somewhere deep inside, you feel alone. Why? Because connection has become a performance, a currency of attention, a constant exchange of updates and validations that rarely reach the soul. You can speak all day and never say anything real. You can be surrounded by people and still feel invisible. Carl Jung said, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you." And that's what makes false connection so painful. You speak, but you are not heard. You show up, but you're not understood. You give, but you're not felt. You begin to wonder, am I the problem? Am I too much? Or maybe not enough? But the problem isn't you. It's the system we've built. A system that values availability over authenticity, responses over presence, noise over depth. In this system, the more connected you are, the less grounded you become. You start answering before you even think, reacting before you even feel, sharing before you even process. You mistake attention for intimacy, familiarity for closeness, and validation for love. But none of these things can feed the soul, because true connection requires space. It requires silence, absence, distance. It grows not in constant stimulation, but in presence. The kind of presence that says, I don't need to be everywhere to matter. I don't need to answer instantly to be real. I don't need to be available to everyone to be loved. But we've been taught otherwise. We've been taught that distance is rejection, that silence is coldness, that slowness is weakness. So we rush, we explain. We show up even when our hearts are tired, hoping that maybe this time we'll be seen. But true connection doesn't require explanation. It doesn't need performance. It doesn't beg to be heard. It waits, it listens, it respects. And the more you chase surface level connection, the further you drift from the one relationship that matters most, the one with yourself. Becoming unreachable doesn't mean cutting people off. It means cutting through the noise. It means choosing depth over quantity, presence over performance, truth over attention. It means remembering that silence can be more intimate than words ever could. So if you're tired of feeling alone in a world that never stops talking, try listening, not to others, to yourself. Let the silence fill you. Let the distance clarify who truly sees you. Let the space reveal who is willing to meet you beyond the surface. Because only when you step back can you truly see who's been with you. Not just in your presence, but in your absence too. There's a moment, a quiet, invisible shift, when you realize you don't owe anyone an explanation. Not for your distance, not for your silence, not for the way you protect your peace. You were taught to justify everything. Why you said no, why you changed your mind, why you didn't respond fast enough. And at some point, justifying yourself became your second language. You thought it made you kind, relatable, considerate. But over time, it made you exhausted. It made you small. Because every explanation was a silent negotiation, begging for permission to be yourself. And when you live like that, your life is no longer your own. It becomes a story written by other people's expectations. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But you can't become yourself while constantly asking others for approval. You don't need to explain why your energy feels sacred now, why you protect your mornings, why you don't reply instantly, why you left that friendship, why you didn't answer the call. You don't need to give a reason for honoring yourself, because the people who truly respect you won't ask. They won't demand a performance or punish your silence. They'll feel your boundaries, and they'll meet you there, quietly, respectfully, without needing a map. But others, they'll push. They'll ask, "Why are you different?" They'll say, "You've changed," as if growth were a betrayal. Don't shrink back. Let them misunderstand. Let them guess. Let them sit with the discomfort of not having access to every part of you. That's the beginning of power. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind. The kind that sits in a room and doesn't explain its presence. It just is. The kind that knows you are not responsible for managing other people's emotions about your life. You are not required to soften your truth so others can swallow it easier. You are not a tour guide through your boundaries. You are not a defendant on trial for protecting your peace. And yes, it will feel strange at first. The silence after a decision, the tension of not replying, the ache of not justifying. But soon, that silence becomes sacred. It becomes your shield, your sword, your clarity. Because every time you resist the urge to explain, you reclaim a piece of yourself. You stop scattering your energy into people's expectations, and you begin to gather it back to the center, back to the truth, back to the quiet knowing that says, "This is who I am." No explanation required. There is something undeniably powerful about a person who doesn't reveal everything. A person who walks through the world with presence, but without explanation. Who speaks only when the moment calls for it. Who holds their truth close, not as a weapon, but as a sacred fire that not everyone is allowed to touch. In a world obsessed with visibility, with sharing, posting, revealing, proving, mystery feels like rebellion. But it's not rebellion. It's refinement. Carl Jung understood this. The deeper you go within yourself, the less you need to prove to the world. Because the ones who truly know themselves don't broadcast. They don't seek to be decoded. They become ungraspable. And that ungraspability, that subtle resistance to being defined, is magnetic. Because humans are drawn to what they can't control, to what they can't fully understand, to what doesn't need their approval. Mystery is not hiding. It's not pretending. It's knowing that your truth does not require explanation to be real. It's trusting that your value is not increased by being understood or decreased by being misunderstood. And when you carry that kind of self-possession, something changes. The room quiets when you enter, not because you demand attention, but because you carry something most people have forgotten how to hold: yourself. There is nothing louder than quiet confidence, nothing more alluring than presence without performance. It's in your stillness, the way you listen without rushing to reply, the way you observe without needing to be seen, the way you let silence stretch, unafraid of the discomfort it creates, because you've made peace with that discomfort. You've learned to live in the in-between spaces, the pauses, the unknowns, the things most people fill with noise. And the more at ease you become in that silence, the more powerful you appear. Not because you're trying to be mysterious, but because you've stopped trying at all. You've stopped handing people the blueprint to your soul. You've stopped translating your depth into bite-sized versions for those who never intended to understand. And that makes you unforgettable. Because when mystery meets self-respect, something rare is born. A presence that can't be replicated. You become a mirror. People see their own confusion in your stillness, their own anxiety in your calm, their own chaos in your quiet. You unsettle them, not by what you do, but by what you no longer give. And that's not cruelty. That's clarity. Mystery invites only those who are willing to go deep. It filters the room for you. And the ones who stay, they stay not to possess you, but to witness you. So let them wonder. Let them sit in the questions. Let them feel the space you no longer rush to fill. Because you don't owe the world your whole self, only the parts you choose to share, and only when you're ready. And that choice is power. Most people fear silence. They rush to fill it with words, explanations, apologies, noise. But those who've walked through the fire of their own minds, they don't fear silence. They live in it. They listen through it. They lead from it. Carl Jung said, "In all chaos, there is a cosmos. In all disorder, a secret order. And in silence, there is a secret language, one that says more than words ever could. Because silence is not absence, it's presence distilled. It's the voice you hear when the world stops shouting. You see, there's a kind of silence that doesn't shrink from tension. It stands still when others panic. It doesn't flinch when provoked. It doesn't tremble in the face of confrontation. That kind of silence commands respect, not because it intimidates, but because it reveals who's truly in control. Not of others, of themselves. Silence shows you don't need to defend your value. You don't need to explain your position. You don't need to meet chaos with chaos. You can pause, breathe, wait, and let others reveal themselves while you remain whole. There is immense strength in not reacting, in not rushing, in not rising to every challenge that invites you to lose yourself. Because silence disrupts the game. It takes away the script people expect. They press your buttons, but you don't blink. They throw bait, but you don't bite. And suddenly, they lose their grip. Because your silence is no longer emptiness, right? It's strategy, it's boundary, it's depth. The one who doesn't respond becomes the one who controls the frame. Not through dominance, but through presence. It's the paradox. The less you say, the more they listen. The less you react, the more they wonder. The less you expose, the more they respect. Silence becomes your armor. Not to hide behind, but to move through life with intention. It teaches you that not every opinion deserves a response. Not every invitation to conflict is worth accepting. Not every question deserves an answer. You become discerning, selective, not because you are closed, but because you are finally in control of your energy. And in that restraint, there is elegance, there's mystery, there's power. Because anyone can speak, anyone can argue, anyone can react. But it takes discipline to remain silent. It takes sovereignty to not explain. It takes maturity to let others talk while you remain centered. And when you master that, when your silence becomes more than just stillness, but a statement, you start to notice something. People stop testing your limits. They start observing them. They start respecting them, not because you told them to, but because your presence did. That's the gift of silence. Not just that it protects your peace, but that it speaks without ever making a sound. There's a kind of pain that doesn't come from holding on. It comes from holding on for too long. To people, to roles, to stories that once made you feel safe, but now only make you feel small. We stay. We explain. We hope. We twist ourselves into shapes just to keep what's already slipping away. Why? Because letting go feels like failure, like abandonment, like death. But Carl Jung said, "We cannot live the afternoon of life according to the program of life's morning. What served you before might be what's suffocating you now. That friendship you keep reviving. That identity you're afraid to outgrow. That version of you who made others comfortable, even while you silently withered. You don't have to hate it to leave it. You don't have to explain it to let it go. Letting go doesn't mean you failed. It means you finally listened to your nervous system, to your intuition, to your soul. Because what no longer fits will start to hurt. Not always with sharp edges, sometimes with silence, with apathy, with that growing feeling of, I don't belong here anymore. And the truth is, you don't. Letting go is not giving up. It's giving in to the part of you that knows you're meant for more. But you can't welcome what's next if your hands are still clinging to what already expired. So, you grieve. Yes, grieve. Because even necessary endings hurt. You sit in the stillness. You let the ache move through your chest. You let the memories rise, not to pull you back, but to remind you how far you've come. And slowly, you begin to feel the space you've freed by not begging, by not explaining, by not forcing what no longer flows. That space is not emptiness, it's possibility. It's where your real self begins to breathe again. Letting go is not cold, it's courageous. It's standing in the fire of discomfort and choosing not to run, not to fix, not to prove. It's trusting that your peace matters more than being liked, that your alignment matters more than their validation. And it's not just about people. It's about the habits that drain you, the guilt that follows you, the stories that chain you. You're not here to carry what isn't yours. You're not here to rescue people who refuse to stand. You're not here to explain your worth to those who refuse to see it. Let it fall. Let it end. Let it be. And as the noise fades, you'll notice something. You're still here, stronger, quieter, more whole. Because letting go doesn't empty you. It reveals what was always yours to begin with: your presence, your clarity, your freedom. There comes a point when peace becomes more important than being right, more important than being understood, than being heard, than being liked. That point is called maturity, and it changes everything. You no longer argue just because you're triggered. You no longer reply to prove a point. You no longer stay in rooms where your silence is taken as weakness and your presence is taken for granted. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But what if the most powerful response is not to dissect, but to detach?" We've been conditioned to think we must respond, that silence is defeat, that walking away is giving up. But it's not. Choosing distance is not about weakness. It's about wisdom. It's saying, my peace is too expensive for this kind of noise. And the moment you start living from that truth, people feel it. They notice the difference, the stillness in your gaze, the absence of reactivity, the calm refusal to dance with other people's chaos. Because drama thrives on engagement, on your reaction, your confusion, your energy. But when you remove your energy from the equation, the fire goes out. Suddenly, the provoker is left alone with their echo, and you're miles away. Not physically, but energetically. You're no longer the one who explains after every attack, who fixes after every misunderstanding, who bleeds just to prove you care. You're the one who observes, who feels, who lets the wave crash without needing to drown in it. And that kind of presence, that restraint, is unnerving to those who are used to your reactions. They don't know what to do with your silence, with your stillness, with your refusal to enter the arena. But you do. You know that not every conflict deserves your participation. Not every tension needs to be resolved. Not every door deserves to be opened just because someone knocked. Distance becomes your boundary. Not a wall, but a quiet decision about what you will and won't carry. And you begin to see, not everyone deserves proximity. Not everyone is equipped to hold your truth without distorting it. Not everyone has earned access to your energy. So you step back, and in that space, you find clarity. You find your voice, not raised, but rooted. You stop being baited into battles that don't belong to you. You stop being pulled into storms you didn't create. You become unreachable, not in the way that isolates, but in the way that liberates. Because you finally understood that presence is powerful. But distance, when chosen with grace, can be sacred. Some limits don't need to be spoken. They are not shouted. They are not posted. They are not accompanied by long speeches. They are felt in your energy, in your tone, in your absence when your peace is threatened. These are the boundaries that speak without words. Carl Jung believed that the unconscious shapes the way we move through the world and the way the world moves around us. So, what happens when your boundaries are no longer defenses, but extensions of your self-respect? You don't need to warn people anymore. They feel it. They sense your distance, your clarity, your refusal to negotiate your worth. Not because you're cruel, but because you've stopped offering discounts on your dignity. You no longer explain why you're unavailable, why you need time, why you didn't answer, why your energy is precious now. You simply live it, and the world responds. Because people don't respect words. They respect energy. They respect what's consistent, what's embodied, what doesn't flinch under pressure. And when you embody your boundaries, you no longer have to guard them. They guard you. You walk into a room and people sense the invisible perimeter, the sacred space around you that says you may approach, but only with clean hands. You no longer over-explain your no. You no longer soften your silence just to make others comfortable. You don't justify your distance because you know true connection isn't built on proximity. It's built on mutual recognition. And if someone needs access to validate their ego, their opinion, their control, they won't find it in you anymore. You've left that arena quietly, powerfully. And here's the truth. Yes, some people will walk away when you start living your boundaries. Let them. Their presence depended on your absence, on your silence, on your flexibility to bend beyond your breaking point. That was not love. That was convenience. And now, you're no longer convenient. You are sovereign. And sovereignty is magnetic. It doesn't scream. It doesn't demand. It doesn't ask to be respected. It simply is. Because when you truly respect yourself, you stop negotiating with those who don't. Your time becomes sacred. Your silence becomes gold. Your distance becomes protection. And suddenly, you don't have to fight for peace. You are peace. Not because you won a battle, but because you stopped fighting battles that were never yours to begin with. So let your boundaries be quiet. Let them be natural. Let them be the rhythm of your life. Not an announcement, but a vibration. Because the ones who are meant to walk with you won't need a map. They'll meet you in the stillness. One of the most painful truths you will ever face is this. You can pour your heart out, choose the right words, soften your tone, open yourself completely, and still not be understood. And that hurts. Not because you're wrong, not because you're broken, but because you wanted someone to see you, to feel your silence, to read the pauses between your words, to hold your truth without needing to reshape it. But most people don't listen to understand. They listen to respond. They listen to fix. They listen through the filter of their own story. And so, you are misread, misjudged, flattened into something easier to digest. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." But maybe, just maybe, the even more terrifying thing is to accept that others might not, that they may never see you as you are, that your depth may forever exceed their language. And still, you are whole. Still, you are enough. There is a profound freedom in releasing the need to be understood, not because you don't care, but because you finally see your value is never dependent on someone else's comprehension. You don't need agreement to be valid. You don't need applause to be worthy. You don't need explanation to belong. You belong to yourself. And that belonging, quiet, solid, internal, is worth more than any nod of approval. Yes, you may lose people when you stop explaining, when you stop molding yourself into someone more palatable. But what you gain is peace. The kind of peace that doesn't need to be proven, that doesn't require constant confirmation. That says, I am no longer waiting for the world to catch up to who I truly am. And this shift from seeking to be understood to standing in your truth regardless is the moment you become unshakable. Not indifferent, not numb, but centered. Because you're no longer leaking energy trying to fit into a frame you never agreed to. You don't have to translate your soul into a dialect that others prefer. You don't have to slow your growth so someone else can keep pace. You don't have to simplify your complexity just to make someone comfortable. You're not a concept to be grasped. You're a life to be witnessed. And those who are meant to walk with you, they will not demand blueprints. They will feel you, even in your silence. So if you feel misunderstood, let that be okay. Don't rush to explain. Don't panic. Don't bend. Stand still. Let the wind of confusion blow past you. Let others think what they need to think, because you are no longer explaining your worth. You are living it. There's a moment, you may not notice it at first, when something inside you quietly shifts. You no longer rush to answer. You no longer shrink to fit. You no longer explain your silence as if it were a mistake. You've stopped seeking softness in places that always cut you. You've stopped begging to be seen by those who only look with their ego. You are no longer waiting. And this is the moment you become unreachable. Not because you've built walls, but because you've become a mountain. Still, vast, rooted, sacred. Carl Jung once wrote, "Solitude is not chosen, it is earned. It is the price of integrity." And now, you've paid that price. You've let go of what was tearing at your spirit. You've reclaimed the space you once gave too freely. You've gathered the pieces that others mistook for access, and you've woven them into sovereignty. Being unreachable is not about disappearing. It's about becoming so whole that no one can take you in pieces again. It's not absence. It's elevation. It's walking into a room and not needing to be noticed, yet being impossible to ignore. Because your presence now carries the weight of someone who no longer asks the world for permission to exist. You are no longer driven by the fear of being misunderstood. You are no longer seduced by the crumbs of connection. You are no longer defined by how others respond to you. You are defined by how you respond to yourself. And the way you do now, with respect, with stillness, with inner loyalty, that becomes your energy. An energy that repels what is chaotic and attracts only what is ready. You no longer chase. You no longer convince. You no longer adjust your light for eyes that never tried to see. You don't raise your voice. Your silence speaks enough. You don't reach out because those who matter already feel you. And the ones who can't handle your distance, they were never meant to be near your truth. You now walk with a different kind of rhythm. Measured, unbothered, certain. You know who you are. You know what you're not. And you no longer apologize for either. This is what happens when you become unreachable. Not emotionally cold, but emotionally clear. Not cut off, but cut free. Not detached from life, but finally deeply connected to the only source that never abandoned you, yourself. So here you are, still, breathing, listening. Not just with your ears, but with your soul. And maybe something inside you has shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, but deeply. Maybe for the first time, you feel the quiet pull back to yourself, to that sacred place you've abandoned for far too long, trying to belong somewhere else. The truth is, you never needed to become more. You only needed to return to the voice within that doesn't shout, to the knowing that doesn't beg, to the presence that doesn't ask to be noticed, because real power doesn't come from being louder, but from being anchored in who you are, in what you feel, in what you no longer have to explain. The world will still try to reach you, to shake you, to pull you back into the noise. But now, you know. You know how to pause, how to breathe, how to listen without reacting. You know how to walk away without guilt, how to protect your energy without apology, how to be present without performing. You are unreachable, not because you've vanished, but because you've arrived. Fully, finally, completely. Carl Jung would say that what you become when you stop reacting is not empty, but whole. And now, that wholeness is yours. Not because someone gave it to you, but because you stopped giving it away. So let this be your reminder. You're not cold. You're not broken. You're not distant. You're simply done explaining, done proving, done performing. And in that silence, a new life begins. One that's quieter, richer, truer. One where you are no longer seen through other people's lenses, but felt through your own essence. So if this journey spoke to something in you, write this in the comments. My silence is not absence, it is dominion. Let the world hear that. Let you hear that. And as we end this video, I won't say goodbye like everyone else does. I won't beg for your attention. I won't ask for your approval. Instead, I'll leave you with silence. A silence that holds power. A silence that holds truth. A silence that holds you. Because this is not the end. It's the beginning of the version of you that no one will ever be able to reach unless you allow it. And that is sacred. I disappear now, but you have just arrived.